for a whole year, and this only happened in March. This represented a 93% increase when compared to United States dollars 349.44 million exported during February 2023. This increase was mainly on the account of higher export earnings from mineral products, tobacco, maize, and cotton. Unemployment creator, number 6, formal jobs as captured by the payee, the pay-as-you-earn register, increased by 3.03% from 1,380,972 employees in 2020-21 to 1,422,857 employees in 2021-2022. The highest number of payee employees were registered in the public administration sector, where we registered 456,782 employees, followed by the manufacturing sector, where we registered 145,448 employees, the wholesale and retail trade, where we registered 97,261 employees. Formal jobs in the agriculture sector also registered an increase from 51,384 employees in 2021 to 57,731 employees in 2021-2022. The private sector contributed about 83% of the total formal sector jobs, with high concentration in agriculture and fishing, where we had 69.4%, manufacturing 5.6%, trade and repairs 8.9%, hotels and restaurants 2%, transport and communication 2.3%, construction 2%, as well as education at 3%. Other critical sectors where recorded employment opportunities include mining and quarrying, utilities, post and telecommunication, financial intermediation, insurance, business services, health and social works, and community and personal services. Ladies and gentlemen, drawing on the economic strategy of the government, my ministry directly contributes to the implementation of 5 broad NRM manifesto objectives. The first objective to which we contribute is, number 1, broadening the economic base by providing and creating economic opportunities in all regions of Uganda. The second objective to which we contribute is creating an integrated and self-sustaining economy based on import substitution and export-oriented growth. The third one is establishing a monetized and formalized economy, graduating households from informal and subsistence levels into the commercial economy. The fourth objective, where we contribute, is achieving the lower middle income status. And number 5, generating productive jobs, as I've been explaining above. To realize the above objectives, the government made several commitments in the manifesto, with a focus on creating more productive jobs through harnessing all factors of production. Let me now use this time to elaborate the progress we have made on the key manifesto interventions under my docket. The first one, the first manifesto commitment is the parish development model. Government made a commitment to support circles in each of the 10,594 parishes in Uganda, putting emphasis on the rural areas engaged in agriculture. As you all know, PDM is a multi-sectoral strategy to create social and economic transformation by moving the 3.9 million households still stuck in the subsistence economy into the money economy. We have been talking about full monetization of the Ugandan economy, and this is partly what we are dealing with. So the PDM is premised on 7 pillars, including Pillar 3, financial inclusion, and that is the one that is spearheaded by the Ministry of Finance. In terms of progress, I'm reporting progress on that particular commitment. In financial year 2021-2022, His Excellency the President launched the parish development model. Under the financial inclusion pillar of the PDM, this is what we have done. PDM circles have been established in 10,588 parishes. In financial year 2021-2022, shilling 67.208 billion was disbursed to 7,855 PDM circles. In the financial year 2022-2023, government provided Uganda shillings 1.059 trillion in the budget for PDM. Uganda shillings 522.95 billion has been disbursed so far to 10,459 PDM circles that are ready. And that is on top of, out of the total number of circles that I mentioned earlier, which are 10,594. So 522.95 billion has been released to them. The second commitment relates to the Myoga Fund to support specialized enterprises, and this covers border riders, women entrepreneurs, carpenters, saloon operators, taxi operators, restaurant owners, welders, market vendors, youth leaders, PWDs, produce dealers, mechanics, tailors, journalists, performing artists, veterans, fishermen, and elected leaders. Those are the people or associations that we are targeting within the Myoga program. Now, in terms of progress, because this is all work in progress, the government has so far disbursed 390 billion shillings under the Myoga program. As of today, 205,710 parish-based associations under 6,748 Myoga circles were mobilized. The program is helping 4,114,200 direct beneficiaries. Government has also capitalized the Microfinance Support Center with Uganda shilling 35.7 billion for on-lending to other circles that might not be falling in the above categories. In the next fiscal year, 2023-24, Uganda shilling 46 billion to the Microfinance Support Center for on-lending has been provided. COVID-19 SME Recovery Fund to support small and medium enterprises that do not fall under the Myoga and don't qualify for UDB funding. And this is the third manifesto commitment. The progress. Government, in partnership with the commercial banks, established the small that were impacted negatively by COVID-19. Uganda shillings 200 billion fund was created and is administered by Bank of Uganda, with government contributing 100 billion, while participating financial institutions contributing another 100 billion. Currently, 398 small businesses have been supported under the fund, with funding totaling to 4.84 billion shillings. So this money is still readily available to borrowers, especially those that were impacted by COVID-19. The fourth manifesto commitment relates to the capitalization of Uganda Development Bank and UDC to provide affordable and long-term capital to agriculture, agro-processing, and manufacturers to support industrialization, import substitution, and export promotion agenda. Let me start by reporting on UDB. Government has over the years increased the capitalization of Uganda Development Bank from Uganda shillings 58.3 billion in financial year 2019-2020, and now to 1.1 trillion as of September 2022. So UDB is now a much stronger institution to lend to the private sector. UDC, this ministry, Uganda Development Corporation, UDC, the ministry continued to capitalize Uganda Development Corporation across the country to invest in coffee, tea, mining, fruits, cocoa, sugar, and construction. These projects are implemented in the districts of Amuru, Nuoga, Kabale, Kabarore, Soroti, Moroto, and Luwero. Government has increased capitalization of UDC from 163.22 billion shillings in financial year 2021-2022 to Uganda shillings 425.37 billion in financial year 2020-2023. This ministry guided the Ministry of Trade, Cooperatives and Industry to present a comprehensive strategy to Cabinet with a view of removing a cap of Uganda shillings 500 billion on UDC capitalization. This was increased to Uganda shillings 5 trillion. Now that the cap has been removed, the government will gradually increase the funding to UDC over the remaining period of the manifesto implementation. Government, through the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, is undertaking a feasibility study to assess the viability of establishing a national bank for cooperatives. Manifesto commitment number 5, study to establish a farmers bank. The study to establish a fully fledged national farmers bank is ongoing. However, the government continues to provide funding to farmers through the agricultural credit facility. Through the agricultural credit facility, which is being coordinated by the Bank of Uganda, Emyoga, and the parish development model, among other avenues. In the future, these could grow into a fully fledged farmers cooperative bank. Number 6, commitment. The 6th commitment is about the recapitalization of the National Housing and Construction Corporation to build low-cost housing for public servants and other deserving citizens. In financial year 2021-2022, shilling 30 billion, actually, was provided under the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development to recapitalize the National Housing and Construction Company. Given that National Housing and Construction Company Limited is a company limited by shares and jointly owned by Government of Uganda and Government of Libya, these funds were removed from the budget for financial year 2022-23 so that the shareholding issue is first resolved, given that one of the shareholders is currently absent. The 7th commitment is about extension of water supply to the 5 industrial parks, namely Kashari Agricultural Park in Mbarara, Mbale Industrial and Business Park, Kapeka Industrial and Business Park, Karamoja Industrial and Business Park, and then number 5, Jinja Industrial and Business Park. In terms of progress, the piped water supply system in Kapeka Industrial Park was completed in financial year 2021-2022. Currently, the Ministry of Water and Environment is working on the sewage network. Little progress is made on the other industrial parks, but we have them in sight. Number 8, the manifesto commitment, the 8th manifesto commitment is about the student loan scheme for those not directly sponsored by the government, but aligned with the scarce skills in the country. The government continues to support and provide funding to the Higher Education Student Financing Board for the Students' Loan Scheme to facilitate scientists at degree and diploma level. A budget of $27.52 billion was allocated this fiscal year, 2022-23, towards the loan scheme. The ninth commitment is about enhancing resource mobilization, which is one of our primary mandates. Both domestic revenue and borrowing and public financial management systems to ensure effective implementation of development programs, i.e. transport and market infrastructure, wealth creation programs such as PDM, Nyoga. All these require resources, and we have to mobilize those resources. Human capital development, one of the largest consumers in our budget. And it comprises initiatives such as the Uganda government intergovernment fiscal transfer, power generation and distribution. So all these consume resources from the budget, which we are required to mobilize. Now, in summary, in terms of progress on that item, the government is implementing the following key reforms under the overall domestic revenue mobilization strategy, DRMS. The electronic fiscal receipting and invoicing solution is now in place. The digital tax stamps has been implemented. The tax register enhancement program, TREP, that is also underway. Implementation of the informality management for compliance and revenue mobilization project, that is already underway. The review of the presumptive tax regime, that's already underway under the DRMS, and the rationalization of tax expenditure, largely relating to tax exemptions. Now, arising from these initiatives, domestic revenue collection is projected to increase from 21.83 trillion in the financial year 2021-2022 to 24.71 trillion in the financial year 2022-2023. The ministry continues to mobilize budget support in the form of borrowing to close the critical funding gaps to ensure that the manifesto commitments are financed. The ministry has enhanced and rolled out systems to improve efficiency and accountability in the utilization of public funds, and such systems include the Integrated Financial Management System, IFMIS, and Electronic Government Procurement, EGP, among others. The 10th commitment is about attracting foreign direct investment, FDI, to invest in 26 priority areas, sectors, as defined in the second schedule of the Investment Code Act 2019. UIA has attracted more investments in the identified 26 priority areas. Uganda's top 10 FDI source countries in the referenced period include China with 49 investors, India 47, Pakistan 9, UK 8, Turkey 6, Kenya 5, USA 4, Germany 3, Lebanon 3, and Tanzania 3. According to UIA statistics, the performance of FDI in terms of employment, sectoral distribution, and investment values in the first half of financial year 2022-23 is as follows. Number one, a total of 165 projects were attracted, of which the manufacturing sector registered the highest number at 103, followed by agriculture, forestry and fishing at 19, and construction with 10 projects. Number two, the central region received the highest number of projects, numbering 120, followed by the eastern region with 19, northern Uganda 14, and western Uganda 12. Number 3, total planned investment reported were worth 7,284.2 million United States dollars. Planned employment expected to be created at 20,945 jobs. Of these jobs, the manufacturing sector contributes the largest share, with 11,146 jobs, followed by agriculture, forestry, and fishing, 6,781 jobs, and accommodation and food services at 659 jobs. Foreign direct investments increased significantly by 48.3% to US $474.87 million in the first quarter of financial year 2022-2023, up from $320.25 million over the same period in financial year 2021-2022. The increment followed after the completion of the final investment decision in February 2022 for Uganda's oil and gas projects. Commitment number 11, progressively enhance salaries and improve other living conditions, particularly staff accommodation for teachers and health workers as the economy improves. And this commitment, this is the progress. During financial year 2020-21, the ministry provided 50 billion shillings for salary enhancement of vice chancellors, deputy vice chancellors, professors, and associate professors to the long-term pay targets, and 7.055% for other staff of public universities. During financial year 2021-2022, the ministry provided 134.9 billion for enhancement of lunch allowance for health workers. During financial year 2022-2023, the ministry provided, number 1, 954.853 billion shillings for salary enhancement of scientists in the mainstream public service, health professionals, science teachers in secondary schools, and science instructors, tutors, and lecturers in BTVET institutions. 2, during the same year, shillings 175.297 billion for salary enhancement of senior UPDF officers. 3, shillings 7.17 billion for salary enhancement of salaries of DPP officers. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development remains dedicated to deliver all the commitments it contributes to in the NRM Manifesto 2021-2026 to stimulate economic recovery, enhance productivity and competitiveness of enterprises, promote wealth creation and jobs for the citizens. The Ministry will continue to play its role of coordinating planning, mobilization of resources to deliver the priorities of the ruling party, and ensuring accountability for resources dispersed to spending entities. Lastly, I commend all Ugandans for supporting the implementation of the NRM agenda, participation in wealth creation, demanding for accountability, and monitoring service delivery. Thank you so much for your attention, for God and my country.
Let's put our hands together once again for a big applause to the Honorable Minister for that elaborate presentation. I think in the interest of managing our time productively, I'm reliably informed the Minister for Energy is around and the PS, and I would gladly invite you to the podium and so that we can have your presentations done, and then we can handle the Q&A session together and conclude. After that, I can see the chairperson, NPA. You can also come and sit in front here as we wait how to manage the presentations. Honorable Minister of State for Energy, Honorable Sibronius Okasai. You are most welcome, and with your technical team, the PS and the technical teams. I want to take recognition of the presence of the Vice Chair of the National Planning Authority, a member of the board, the National Planning Authority, Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, is already here with us. Honorable Minister, the Manifesto Week is about accountability. We are here to explain to Ugandans how far we have gone on the progress of the social contract. And you just came in when the Honorable Minister of State for Planning, representing the Minister of Finance, had presented the status of how far we have gone on this journey, and as far as the areas he supervises. So allow me to invite you to come and inform the country the sector of minerals, energy minerals, is equally a big contributor to our transformation journey. I believe there are many, many commitments that we made to the people of Uganda, and they are very keen to hear on how far we have gone on this journey. So allow me to invite you here, and you address the country in that respect. I thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Energy and mineral sector is quite a huge sector, and we have a lot to say in delivering the manifesto. And the presentation, I'm going to divide it into 3 parts. 1 is energy. 2, we shall talk about minerals. And 3, we shall talk about petroleum. Those are 3 key sub-sectors in the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. So the presentation will be made by 3 different people. I'll start by talking about energy. I'll invite the PS to talk about petroleum, and my colleague, if he comes early, he will talk about minerals. If he doesn't come, we shall get somebody else within the room to talk about minerals. I'll start by giving an overview of the whole sector. Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development has got a very clear mandate, mission, and medium-term goals. We also have an overview. We shall talk about the overview of delivering the Manifesto 21 to 2026. I'll also talk about progress made on the implementation of the sector commitments. 1, Sustainable Energy Development Program, Sustainable Development of Petroleum Resources Program, and Minerals Development Program. We shall cover challenges in the energy and mineral development sectors, and then I will talk about way forward for the remaining part of the Manifesto 2021-2026. And then we shall conclude. So I will start with the energy sector. But before I get there, I just talked about the mandate of the sector. The mandate of our sector is to establish, promote the development of strategically manage and safeguard the rational and sustainable exploitation and utilization of energy and mineral resources for the social and economic transformation of our country. The mission is to ensure reliable, adequate, and sustainable exploitation, management, and utilization of energy and mineral resources of our country. As a way of introduction, medium-term policy goals. In order to contribute effectively to the national objectives as enshrined in the National Development Plan 3, the ministry policy goals are: 1, establish sustainable energy development program to meet the energy needs of the country by providing adequate, affordable, clean, and reliable energy for sustainable socio-economic growth and development. 2, put in place a sustainable development petroleum resource program to attain equitable value from the petroleum resources and spur economic development in a timely and sustainable manner. And 3, put in place a mineral development program which will increase the exploitation and value addition to selected resources for job-rich industrialization of our country. Progress in the implementation of the Manifesto pledges for the period 2021 to 2026. Pledge 1, reduce the cost of power, particularly for manufacturing, to US 5 cents per kilowatt hour by 2024-2025 from US dollars 8.7 cents in 2021 to 2020. Progress made so far. A tariff of US cents 5 per kilowatt hour has been achieved for all extra-large consumers of electricity, those that consume above 1.5 megawatts. Further, a tariff of US cents 5 per kilowatt hour for industrial parks that are willing to increase production capacity to maintain their monthly billing invoices without affecting the financial sustainability of the electricity supply industry was implemented effective July 2023. This was piloted in the industrial parks of Kapeka and MMP Industrial Park in Buikwe across all times, that is shoulder peak and off-peak. Direct purchase of electricity. With the amendment of the Electricity Act in 2022, manufacturers who qualify are now able to purchase electricity directly from the power generation stations. It's repeated. Pledge 1, reduce the cost of power, particularly for manufacturers, to US cents 5. This is repeated. Okay. Progress to date, other initiatives to bring the cost of electricity down. Government introduced the cooking tariff, which is levied at US cents, at Uganda shillings 412 per kilowatt hour charge after consuming the first 80 units and before the 150th unit. Government also introduced a hybrid connection scheme to ease connection for households that cannot meet the full connection cost. Under this arrangement, instead of consumer paying a total of 720,000 shillings for a connection, a customer pays 200,000 and is immediately connected. Government offsets a grant of 250,883, and the customer gets an interest-free loan of 270,000 shillings, deductible from a tariff over an 8-year period. Pledge number 2, increase power generation capacity from 984 megawatts in 2017 to 2018 to 3,500 megawatts in 2024-2025. Progress to date. Electricity generation capacity increased to 1,378.1 megawatts with effective capacity of 1,279.7 megawatts. This is against a peak demand of about 824 megawatts. The installed capacity is expected to increase to over 2,000 megawatts with the commissioning of Karuma Dam project, which is expected in September 2023. Progress on other power generation plants is as follows. The 600 megawatt Karuma hydropower plant, overall project progress stands at 99.6% for the project. RAP for the reservoir stands at 85%. The first unit is now generating 100 megawatts to the grid. Other units are expected to be commissioned by September 2023. The Karuma interconnection project was energized fully, and the West Nile is now connected to the main grid through Karuma Lera transmission line. Karuma Kawanda 400 kV line is also energized. 6.6 megawatt Nyaga 3 hydropower project. Construction progress stands at 90%, and RAP implementation is at 96%. Commissioning is planned at the end of 2023. Pledge number 3, increase high voltage transmission capacity from 2,354 kilometers in 2019-2020 to 4,354 kilometers in 2024-2025. Progress made. The total length of the network is now 4,011.56 kilometers. 160 medium voltage transmission capacity was also added to the grid after commissioning 2 new substations, Oluyo SS, which is 2 times 20 MVA, Lucera SS, 3 times 40 MVA. Several transmission lines and substations are still under construction as presented below. 23.8 kilometers, 130 kV Mutundwe Entebbe project. Progress is 100%. Transmission line works progress at 100%. RAP implementation at 85% of the PAP paid. Mirama Kabale 132 kV transmission line project. Substations, detailed engineering, designing commenced. Land acquisition for the transmission line compensated 942 of the pubs. Masaka Mbarara 400 kV transmission line and associated substation project. Land acquisition is ongoing, and 61% of the project affected persons have been compensated. Kampala Metropolitan Transmission System Improvement Project. Land acquisition is at 90% complete. Namambe south to Lucera transmission. Overall progress is at 100%. Grade expansion and rehabilitation project, JAP, construction of Kole Gulu Nebi Aroa 132 kV transmission line. RAP implementation is at 91%. PAPs paid. Construction progress is 83%. Gulu Agago hydropower plant transmission line. Overall progress of Gulu Agago hydropower plant transmission works is at 86%. Gulu 132/33 kV substation. Agago 132 kV hydropower switchyard and Agago 132/33 IS substation. Overall progress is at 98.4%. Pledge under Energy Development Program. Focus areas. I hope that one is put on screen. Tower foundation erection in Nabigrua Swamp in Tebe. I think this one, you can read for yourselves there. There's progress on tower foundation and erection in Nabigrua Swamp in Entebbe. Entebbe substation switchyard, Agago substation switchyard and works. Pledge number 4, increase the number of households with access to modern energy services to 60% by 2024-2025 from 24 in 2018-19. Progress to date. Access to energy increased to 57% nationally. To date, the number of grid-connected consumers has increased to over 1,830,000. This is expected to increase by 1,300 with the government resumption of electricity connection policy and the commencement of the electricity access scale-up project this year. Electricity access scale-up access project targets households, commercial enterprises, public institutions, mining centers, industrial parks, thereby creating demand up to 500 megawatts. The project targets households, commercial enterprises, public institutions, mining centers, industrial parks. That's repeated. To strengthen access, the distribution network is being enhanced. The distribution network, both of medium voltage and low voltage networks, increased to 59,038 kilometers from 54,919 kilometers, with low voltage rising from 30,958 kilometers, 11 kV, 7,147 kilometers, and a 33 kV, 20,917 kilometers. Currently, total distribution substations have a combined capacity of 2,527 MVA. Pledge number 5, promotion of renewable energy systems. Progress to date. We commissioned 39 solar PV mini-grids located in western, central, and northern Uganda. We promoted the use of new renewable energy solutions that include dissemination of 26 solar water pumping systems for farms and institutions, 80 institutional solar systems in health and educational institutions, 100 solar mosquito killers, 100 solar street lights, 100 domestic biogas systems, 200 ethanol stoves for clean cooking distributed. We also completed the installation of a 4 megawatt solar project at Busitema University with a grant from the Arab Republic of Egypt. We completed 2 feasibility studies for the development of total 5 megawatts of waste to energy plants in Kampala. We also completed studies and established the potential of water to energy in addition to 4 cities. Efforts to lay firm foundation for the development of 2,000 megawatts of nuclear energy are in progress as follows. The amendment of the Atomic Energy Act 2008 is approved by Cabinet Standing Committee on the Nuclear Energy. The Act is expected to be finalized by the end of 2024. The process of construction of the Center of Excellence for Nuclear Science and Technology at Soroti University has been initiated, and the project design is on course. The process of development of 2,000 megawatts in Buyende Nuclear Power Plant project is ongoing, and site identification and assessment is near complete. Baseline data on uranium prospects in Sembabule and Buheju districts was collected as part of the preparation of sustainable development of a nuclear fuel resource project. Promotion of renewable energy systems, clean energy access. On 6th July 2022, government through the ministry launched the distribution of liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, starter kits. The NDP3 emphasizes the use of increased uptake of LPG, commonly referred to as cooking gas, at the household level as part of the government's effort to improve the quality of life. 10,500 LPG starter kits have so far been distributed to households in Kampala, Mukono, and Wakiso districts. Plans are to contribute an additional 13,000 kits before the end of 22-23 financial year. This comprises of 13 kilogram cylinder, a regulator, hose pipe, and double plate cooker in the districts of Kampala, Mukono, and Wakiso. We also acquired 20 acres of land for the construction of an LPG facility in Mukono. Completion of the design is planned for next financial year. What is shown there are the types of cylinders that we are giving out. Pledge number 6, connect West Nile to the national grid. Progress to date. As a long-term power supply solution to West Nile, government is constructing a 132 kV Kole Gulu Oluyo Nebi Arua power lines that will deliver over 200 megawatts of bulk power to West Nile. In the short term, my ministry has constructed a 33 kV Oluyo Pakwach distribution line to interconnect with the West Nile grid so that part of West Nile electricity is drawn from Oluyo substation, which we commissioned on 23rd March 2023. Oluyo substation now supplies between 4 to 4.8 megawatts to West Nile, including Adjumani, Moyo, and their environs. Pledge number 8, establishing charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, e-mobility promoting. Progress to date. We developed the Electric Mobility and Fuel Efficiency Country Program. We also developed a harmonized framework and standard for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Minimum energy performance standards for selected appliances have been developed and enforced. 5 new minimum energy performance standards have been developed and awareness created. This is how far we have gone in the electricity sector. And now I'll request the PAs to come and take us through the petroleum resources program.
Honorable ministers present, the different government entities present, ministries, departments, agencies, and our fourth estate, the media that is in the house. Before I can give you an update on the petroleum subsector, I will introduce the team from the ministry that is also attending this very important meeting. I will start from the team from the energy subsector, where we are represented by the Chief Executive Officer of the Electricity Regulatory Authority, Engineer Ziria Tibalwa. In the house also is the Chief Executive Officer, Uganda Electricity Generation Company Limited, Engineer Dr. Harrison Mutikanga. Equally is the Assistant Commissioner for Electricity Supply, Engineer Abdonna Twine from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. In attendance also is the Acting Commissioner for the Nuclear Energy Department, and Mr. Tungotio Dennis, our Senior Energy Officer handling aspects of nuclear. I will now have the team from the Directorate of Petroleum, led by Mr. Hani Malinga, the Director of Petroleum. In attendance also is the Commissioner in charge of the upstream. The upstream covers petroleum exploration, development, and production, Mr. Frank Mujisha. In attendance also is, of course, our Commissioner for Planning, who coordinates all of us, Mr. Paul Okitoy. Moving on to the Directorate of Geological Surveys and Mines, we have the Commissioner in charge of geothermal, ensuring our energy security, Mr. Bahati. In addition is Assistant Commissioner, Madam Nasuna Grace. I know there might be other members spread. We will continue to recognize them as we proceed. So, honorable ministers and members, this presentation is on the status, so the status of the NRM Manifesto pledges that we committed to as a ministry, specifically in petroleum. We will walk through each pledge and where we are, but also we will forecast our plans regarding the different pledges. Our very first pledge is to increase efficiency in the extraction of the oil and gas resources. And just to remind participants, whereas we did discover about 6.5 billion barrels of oil in place, and of which 1.4 billion barrels is recoverable, it is important that we continue to plan for additional resources, but also ensure that that which is discovered has been well extracted. So in order to do that, you will recall in 2008, we did put in place a national oil and gas policy, and in line with our policy instruction and review of policies, we are now reviewing the policy to address a number of aspects. Critically, we are reviewing it to ensure we address the emerging issues around the energy transition and the role. Energy transition is basically a target, a global target to reduce on our utilization of fossil fuels to more cleaner energy sources, pointing to renewable energy. But as we do that, oil and gas will continue to play a critical role as we transit. So in our policy, we are looking at how we align with the new energy transition, and we have started the amendment process. The reviews have been done, and we currently have a draft national petroleum policy that we are preparing to take to cabinet for review. Once this policy is in place, it will enable us to align very well with the energy transition policy, but also with the energy policy that has just been approved to support us in the energy subsector. Tying in with the national oil and gas policy that is under review, we continue to ensure that we have a robust legal and regulatory framework in terms of the standards, codes, and guidelines to support our petroleum subsector. So we've put in place a number of standards, but also codes, and that will be very important in the monitoring of the oil and gas activities. So the details are provided in terms of numbers, but we are committed to continue to provide guidance from a legal and regulatory angle as the ministry to support the sector. The other aspect tying in with Pledge 1 on efficiency in extraction of oil and gas resources is reserves replacement. So we've continued to undertake geological and geophysical surveys in the frontier basins to ensure that we are also exploiting new areas. In this regard, we have just concluded the second licensing round for petroleum, and arising from this round, we have issued 2 production sharing agreements, one to our national oil company for Kasuruban, meaning that we have empowered our national oil company to also venture into the exploration area. But the other company also issued a production sharing agreement is DGR, a company out of Australia, and following the issuance, we expect that these two companies will progress with an aggressive exploration program to be able to support us in our reserves replacement agenda. Why do we need reserves replacement in terms of oil and gas? We are developing a number of infrastructure that we'll highlight later, the petroleum refinery, but also the East Africa crude oil pipeline. And it is important that these are supported sustainably with sufficient crude oil and gas resources. Moving on, remaining on promotion of countries' petroleum potential, that is just a pictorial. The minister issuing the licenses to DGR and UNOC. Going on ahead, in aligning still with Pledge 1, the next slide, we continue to promote geological and geophysical surveys for a number of basins. We do have what we call our prospective basins. Besides the Albertine Graben, or that part of the Rift Valley, we do have other basins of Lake Choga, but also Kadam Moroto Basin in Karamoja. So we are doing extensive work in terms of geological and geophysical surveys in Moroto Kadam Basin, and from that, we have received positive results. We've seen seepages from this work, and that creates confidence that there is potential for crude oil resources in the Moroto Kadam Basin. So we'll be moving to undertake additional work. We are currently analyzing the data at about 76.2% of the basin covered. And once we conclude that work, we will then promote this area as part of our next licensing round. There are a few photos there to show the work that Director Malinga's team leads on. You can see they spend a lot of time in Karamoja, and on the right, that is a dark color, the red and highly viscous, the tar appearance. That was the seepage that we observed in Karamoja, which creates a lot of hope. Moving on to Pledge 2, that focuses on producing oil, but also byproducts and generally crude oil. We did successfully undertake the commencement of drilling for Kingfisher following the FID, the final investment decision that was made last year. And the commencement of drilling is a significant milestone that goes to confirm that we are on course to achieve our first oil come 2025. So that milestone was achieved, and aligning with that, we continue with the development of the refinery. I'll give a bit of detail ahead, but we are currently negotiating the long-term agreements, having concluded the front-end engineering design for the refinery, meaning that today we know the design we are going to set up, we know the products that we are going to produce from this refinery. That is liquefied petroleum gas, diesel, petrol, heavy fuel oil, and a little bit, and some jet, and a little bit of kerosene. That also speaks to the fact that we now know the investment capex for this refinery, and we are now moving into the stage of mobilizing the financing together with the private sector investors that we are working with on this project. Alongside the refinery, we do undertake another critical infrastructure, which is the Kabale International Airport that forms the Kabale, or Kabale, it's now Kabalega International Airport, thanks to Cabinet's guidance. It was renamed to Kabalega, and that airport is at 82% completion. We work with Ministry of Works and Transport to ensure that it progresses, and we expect that it will be commissioned fully during early 2024. And that airport will support both inbound but also outbound traffic, agro-processing, to ensure we are supporting that in Hoima and the Invaros, but also the tourism subsector. So we'll continue to work with Ministry of Works and Transport to ensure that that airport is concluded as planned. Now, staying with Pledge 2 and aspects of the East Africa crude oil pipeline, there will be a bit of detail ahead, but we continue to develop the East Africa crude oil pipeline. Despite the negative narrative that it has been receiving unnecessarily globally, we are mobilizing the funding for this project, but in order to support that drive as the ministry, we ensured that we put in place the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline Act that was passed by Parliament and assented to by the President last year, and this has gone a long way to support the project development. We are also undertaking the resettlement action planning, including cash compensation, but also resettlement of affected persons. Recall this pipeline traverses both Uganda, 20% of it is in Uganda, 80% is in Tanzania, a total length of 1,445 kilometers. So 68% progress has been registered on the Ugandan side, and 86% progress in terms of resettlement action planning on the Tanzanian side. So we continue to work to ensure that the construction works on this project commence early 2024. Moving on to the status of the upstream, which aligns with the pledge, we continue to also ensure that the production activities are progressing in terms of development and production. And if you've been following, we had quite some activity early this year, bringing in a number of rigs that will support in the petroleum exploration. Petroleum production, I beg your pardon. So just going back to the previous slide, you will see that we have brought in 2 rigs to support the development for the upstream, and we are preparing to bring in the 3rd rig, that's specifically for Tilenga, and this should be in the country by the end of this year latest, and we expect that full drilling in Tilenga will commence this June that we are entering into now that the 2 rigs have been assembled. Moving on to Kingfisher, which we spudded, that's the previous slide, the person projecting. We did successfully undertake that, and for Kingfisher, where we target to drill 31 wells, we will continue with that activity to ensure that we are progressing successfully. So we will continue. I'll follow the person projecting. That is the Kabale Industrial Park. Like I indicated, the Kabale Industrial Park is a 29.57 square kilometer park that we acquired for purposes of development of our petrol-based industrial park. It will house not only the refinery in your right-hand corner, but also the international airport, that strip that you see. And then on the left-hand side, you have a collection of heavy industries covering the petrochemical industries. So this park is being developed by the Uganda National Oil Company, and we have tasked them to lead in the identification of a joint venture partner with whom they will operate and manage the park. We are promoting the different investments to ensure that that park is developed. So, and we want to thank the Minister of Finance on supporting us under the Dutch financing to acquire some funding to support us in the development of the park. Moving on to the next slide, that is just a pictorial. We have had a lot of, I would say, negative narrative around our resettlement action planning, and we want to clarify that our resettlement action planning processes have followed the requisite legal and regulatory framework in the country, but also the International Finance Corporation, IFC, World Bank resettlement guidelines. So it is not true what has been in the media. Sometimes they broadcast refugee camps and claim that these are what we are setting up for oil and gas, and we want to demystify that, and the media needs to capture that very well, that we have followed the requisite legal and regulatory processes. Those are the different facilities or infrastructure we have set up to support the oil and gas sector. Moving on to the next slide, keep scrolling. This is the East Africa crude oil pipeline. Just to reconfirm that we are undertaking the engineering, procurement, and construction management. What this means is that as we prepare for construction, we are finalizing with the detailed designs. And in order to build our capacity, although this is led by the ECOP company, where UNOC is representing government, and there is Total Energies, CNOC, and Tanzania Petroleum Development Corporation, we always attach our ministry teams, our technical teams, to ensure that, one, we are getting value from this process, but two, that we are building our capacity, because this is the first crude oil pipeline being developed in East Africa, so it's important that we don't lose the opportunity to build our capacity, so we attach teams to that. That particular slide is, we did issue the licenses to support the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline Company to undertake the activities. So that was one of our key deliverables as the ministry to support the pipeline. And then moving on to the next slide, that goes again to show the different resettlement action plan that we have done specifically now under the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline. And you can see the minister launching some of the resettlement action facilities, Honorable Dr. Ruth Nankabira. Just moving on, this is a very critical slide, and it speaks to our energy transition plan as a country. As we prepare to transit to what they are calling cleaner energy, although we say we're already there, because today our hydropower or our energy mix is largely hydro, which is clean at 80% about. So Uganda is already compliant in principle. But as we prepare to transit the 80% of Ugandans that are relying on biomass, the issue of gas is very critical. And whereas we have discovered some gas in the country at about 500 billion cubic feet, that is for associated gas, and about 178 billion cubic feet for non-associated purely gas fields, that is not substantial enough to support our ambition to have more Ugandans utilizing LPG. So as part of the in-country plans, yes, we are planning to use some of that gas from the upstream, bottled as LPG. However, in order to support this ambitious plan, we are working with the government of Tanzania to see that we can lay a pipeline that will bring natural gas from Tanzania to Uganda to do three things. One, to support our iron ore industry in terms of smelting, especially because today, of course, we are using coal and other options that are not very clean. So through this program, we'll be able to have clean gas to support our iron and ore industry, but also will support the domestic requirements for gas and also the industrial or commercial requirements. Today, UEGCL is running a thermal power plant, and we've already entered discussions with the company on how it can be converted to using clean gas. So just going back, we have entered a memorandum of understanding with the government of Tanzania, and that was a ceremony where Honorable Okasai presided to ensure we can advance the development of that gas pipeline. So we are preparing to commence the feasibility studies for that gas pipeline. So moving on, aligning with the global drive of environment, social governance, where all our projects have registered compliance, because as we were preparing to finance the ECOP, but also the upstream, a due diligence was done on our projects, and they were found to be compliant in terms of environment. So as a ministry, we continue to work with all the entities, including the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, but also the Office of the Prime Minister. And thanks to the Office of the Prime Minister, we did launch our National Oil Contingency plan, spill contingency plan, which is supposed to help us handle any emergencies in case of a spill. So we have the structures and we are able to respond in real time to ensure we can address any spill. That was the Right Honorable Prime Minister launching that spill contingency plan. So moving on, we continue to address the other pledges, and that particular pledge is to do with aspects of, unfortunately, I can't see you. So that particular pledge is to do with, once again, I had already highlighted this, the ECOP, but I will emphasize just a few things here without repeating the earlier mentioned. Now, for the ECOP, we want to thank the Ministry of Finance. They have supported us in meeting all our equity requirements for ECOP. So today, the Uganda National Oil Company has been availed to a tune of $268.3 million in equity, and we are now able to honor our equity obligations to support the ECOP project. But additionally, once again, thanks to Ministry of Finance and Cabinet, we've been able to budget for the refinery equity requirements of about 200.1 billion UGX as an initial investment that we require to meet our ultimate equity obligation of $480 million. So this was being availed in phases as we inject into the refinery project. So we want to really thank everyone that has supported that drive. Just running through the next slide. That is on the refinery. I already highlighted it, and we continue to work on a number of aspects there. The other critical aspect is on the alternative transport modes that we are working on. In order to ensure security of supply of petroleum products, we continue to work on our lake transport to ensure we are able to bring product via Lake Victoria. So we are working today with one of the private companies, Mahati, and we've Mahati have concluded development of a 70 million liter storage facility in Kauku that is now able to receive product via lake, picking from Kisumu, come by barge, and dock in Kauku, and then we are able to supply the rest of the country. That has removed a significant number of trucks from the road, but also it goes to align with our aspects of energy transition, clean energy, and reduction of emissions. Equally, continues to work also to develop the Ginger Storage Terminal and also put a jetty to be able to receive more product at the Ginger Storage Terminal. So all these are efforts to ensure the security of supply of products. The sector is quite broad, but one of the pillars for this subsector is national content, and it's important that we speak to it. And to us, national content is underpinned by 6 or 5 pillars. First, employment of Ugandan citizens, where we are very keen to ensure Ugandans are employed, and we'll give the figures shortly. But also capacity building. It's not enough to have ambitions of employing Ugandans, but are we building their capacity to be marketable, to be competitive in order to access these opportunities? We'll speak to that. The other one is enterprise development, where we also support SMEs and other companies to ensure they are able to participate efficiently in the oil and gas sector, but also use of locally produced goods and services, where we have been very deliberate to ring-fence about 16 goods and service areas where Ugandans can participate. And of course, transfer of knowledge and technology. So in terms of employment, we have seen quite some progress. As of end of March 2023, out of the 10,651 employees in the oil and gas sector, of these, 9,988 were Ugandans, giving us a 94%. employment level. That speaks to the local nature of the industry. Now, that is on employment. When we come to the companies that have provided goods and services, to date, 624 companies have been involved in the provision of goods and services, of which 460 companies were Ugandan. So that again speaks to more than 50% of these companies being Ugandan. Of course, we can discuss the issue of tier 1, tier 2, where is the most value, and we are going to demonstrate that shortly. Now, we also, in our drive to build capacity, over 12,000 Ugandans trained in advanced levels of heavy goods, vehicle driving, welding, electricals, etc., so that they are able to participate in the sector. And then we continue to encourage joint venture arrangements where Ugandans are still either developing technical or financial capacity. We encourage them to enter joint ventures. And to date, over 30 joint ventures between Ugandan entities and international entities have been approved for provision of different goods and services. And 12 of these joint ventures have so far been awarded contracts totaling to 117 million US dollars. So in these 12, there will be Ugandans benefiting. So we continue with our national content drive, but specifically the fourth estate is always asking, specifically in the upstream, what is happening? Now for Tilenga, just breaking it down, Tilenga has so far made 578 procurements, totaling to 2.263 billion US dollars, of which 506 of these procurements went to Ugandans, giving a total of about 473 million US dollars. So 21% of that value of 2.26 billion went to Ugandan companies. Remember, this is a nascent sector, and we continue to develop our capacity. So as our capacity improves, we expect that our level of participation will also improve. So we also give a detail which we can avail to the fourth estate on employment for Tilenga. That's the next paragraph there. Then when you come to Kingfisher, equally, there's been quite progress there, bullet 2 specifically. We have made 168 procurements worth about 817 million US dollars, of which 141 procurements worth 77 million US dollars went to Ugandan companies. So in terms of value retention, this speaks to 28%. Now, in terms of our overall target for the construction phase, we expect that we should at least hit 40% local content in terms of value retained in the country. That is based, of course, on the capacity and what we can deliver. I will run through that. The ECOP, that is just a breakdown. The details can also be given. For the ECOP, the total value of contracts approved today is about 2.22 billion US dollars, and about 120 million US dollars has gone to Ugandan contractors and subcontractors. So, and the number of contracts is 38. So you can see that as we continue to develop our national capacity, we should see more Ugandans benefiting from the sector. The next slide just shows you the trend over the years, because we are usually asked, but are we seeing improvement in use of goods and services? Yes, we are. If you look at that trend chart, 2017 is the first bar code, or the first bar, very minimal. At that time, we had about, in terms of a number of companies, we had about 378 that were qualified on our national suppliers database. Over time, because there is a criteria for you to enter the database, so to be permitted to join that database. And over the years, more companies are meeting this criteria. Today we have, for 2022, we have 1,866 Ugandan companies that have been able to qualify to access the national supplier database. That means we have 1,866 companies that can potentially provide a range of goods and services, which for us is progress. That is just a breakdown of the different local companies, but specifically we also show the areas that have been ring-fenced for Ugandan companies in the law, in our regulations, and meaning that Ugandan companies have a right of first refusal for those particular areas, and we only go to a joint venture arrangement or an international when Ugandan companies are unable to demonstrate or go through the bidding process. So it covers a range of areas of transportation, security, etc. I will then skip that. That's a detail to pledge for on maintaining security of supply of petroleum products, which we had also spoken to. At the height of COVID, but also when the Russia-Ukraine war commenced, we did experience a global shock, and we keep calling it the trilemma of the industry. We were in the middle of addressing our energy transition goals, but also supply chain disruptions and then issues of environment. And we did experience a shock on the petroleum product prices. And we working with our neighboring countries, Kenya and Tanzania, we worked very hard to ensure that Uganda remains supplied. And to date, we are happy to report that the prices on the pump stations have largely stabilized as we continue to monitor the international space in terms of stability. So with that, that has been a run through the petroleum subsector quite wide, covering the upstream, midstream, and downstream. I'll now invite a representative of the Director of Mining through her Commissioner, Mr. Bahati, Madam Grace Nasuna, to walk us through the Mineral Development Program. But as she comes, I will just give an overall target or vision for the mining sector. Our target is to ensure value addition, and we are now focused on ensuring in-country value processing to be able to maximize value in the country. But also from the Mining Act, we are focused on supporting the National Mining Company that is being put in place to ensure that it also participates competitively in the mining industry to maximize our value, but also ensure that our strategic ambitions are achieved as a country. So Madam Nasuna, you'll introduce yourself and you proceed with that subsection. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nasuna Grace. I am an Assistant Commissioner in charge of Geoscience. I stand in for my Commissioner, who is delayed by some issues. I'll just run through quickly the Mineral Development Program, which we contribute to the Manifesto. We pledged to increase exploration and quantification of priority minerals and geothermal resources across the country. And so far, we have got gold targets that have been identified in Buhweju, Mubende, Namaingo, Karamoja, and Zombo districts. We also have geochemical surveys on uranium targets generated from the airborne geophysical surveys. And these are in the areas of Ndale, Katoro, Boma, Rashaka, and Chambogo. And the rare earth elements and the base metals in Bukusu carbonatite complex. And the iron ore exploration in Chigezi, where additional iron ore resources of 318 million tons have been mapped. And the bentonite is also mapped in Kaisotonia. The urban geophysical survey and geological mapping of Karamoja region is almost complete, and it is at 78%. And we are now carrying out geological and geochemical survey. So merging of this data is being done by the quality controller of the project. We also pledge to increase exploration and quantification of priority minerals and geothermal resources across the country. And so far, geothermal investigation, the ministry has completed surface studies at Kibiro, Buranga, and Panyimol. The geothermal exploration has also advanced from surface studies now to 2 major geothermal prospects, Kibiro and Panyumul. 16 temperature gradient holes were drilled, and 8 each at Kibiro and Panyumul. Yes, we continue to this pledge of increasing exploration and quantification of priority minerals of geothermal resources across the country. The progress is continued. Geothermal exploration. The Ministry of Energy has completed geothermal surface exploration at Kibiro. 16 temperature, this is a repetition, sorry. I can see it's a repetition. I'll move on to the next slide. Pledge 2. We pledge to strengthen the legal and regulatory framework as well as the human resource and the institution capacity. And so far we have the Mining and the Minerals Act 2022 being enacted. This law will address the issue of local content and will reduce speculation in the mineral sector. It will also allow the mineral traceability and certification. This is a commitment by the government of Uganda to stop illegal exploitation of minerals and natural resources. The law will also address other environmental issues that were not addressed in the old law, 2003. We will have social and sector governance, and we will have state participation, whereby government will have a national mining company to handle government mining on behalf of government. We have also established a biometric registration system. This is to register artisanal and small-scale miners, and with this we will be able to track them, and therefore we will not have them just mine anywhere, but we will have them given areas to concentrate on their mining and not just mine anywhere. Yes, when we continue with this pledge of strengthening the legal and regulatory framework, we monitored earthquakes and geotechnic disturbances occurring in Uganda. The seismic data that was collected from all the stations has been processed. You can see Uganda is in the risk to have earthquake between the scale of 4.2 to 6.8. The next pledge is to increase investment in mining and value addition. Government has conducted promotion of mineral resources and attracted the following private sector investment. We have attracted the Wagagai Mining Limited, and this is a large-scale gold project in Busia. It is scheduled for commissioning in December this year. Have also attracted the rare earth elements in Makutu, Bugwere district, where over 500 million of tons of rare earth elements have been estimated in this eastern region. We have also attracted the graphite project at Orom in Ramo district. We have 4 cement factories, and these cement factories are utilizing marble, pozzolana for cement manufacturing. Over 10 gold refineries have been established in Uganda to refine gold at 99.99% and align it with the government commitment to attract investment and promote exports to support industrialization, economic diversification, and structure transformation. We have also attracted iron ore deposits in southwestern Uganda and in eastern Uganda. On the same pledge to increase investment, we are establishing a modern mineral analysis laboratory and mineral beneficiation centers. So far, phase 1 of the establishment of this modern mineral laboratory in Entebbe to provide analytical service to the government and industry was completed. And now design works for the laboratory are being done. In addition, 2 mineral beneficiation centers have been constructed in the country. This is Fort Portal and Tungamo. centers have been constructed in the country, and the centers, once fully equipped, are expected to take services closer to the citizens, and act as training and demonstration centers, as well as centers for excellence on mineral value addition. The government is in the process of finalizing the ISO accreditation for this mineral laboratory so that it is accepted internationally and will no longer be able to try to take samples out, because our lab will be fully certified according to the ISO standards. On the same pledge, Government of Uganda put in place an interministerial team to fast track the redevelopment of Kilembe mines. 14 companies expressed interest of redeveloping this mine, and 7 of them were shortlisted. And currently, the government is finalizing to issue the bidders and the mineral production sharing agreement to be negotiated with the successful bidders. Government is also undertaking the clearance of waterways at Kilembe mines. The next slide shows you the laboratory building to accommodate all laboratory techniques required to add value. These are the designs. The first one on the left and on the right. In the beneficiation centers, these are already constructed. They are not designs. They are already constructed in Foto and in Tungamo. And so far training is also going on. So I will go through the challenges of the energy and mineral development. Land acquisition for government for energy and petroleum project is taking a long time and considerable budget due to several complexities experienced in the process. There is vandalism on the transmission lines and other installations. The activities of artisanal miners are posing also a risk. Lengthy and protracted negotiations on taking the final investment decision for projects in the oil and gas. We also have inadequate financing for development, investment in development projects, such as equity contribution in oil and gas investment projects. The private sector is reluctant to invest in power generation projects as they require guarantees from government, like escrow accounts and sovereign guarantees. Under the exploration of minerals and geothermal resources, that is affecting investment in the mineral sector. There is under exploration of minerals and geothermal resources that is affecting investment in the mineral sector. There are high operation and maintenance costs of the mineral laboratories. The government of Uganda, the government of Uganda counterpart funding availability and funding release is unpredictable, and this affects our obligations. So the way forward for the remaining manifesto period. Okay, thank you so much.
You can note the excellent presentation by the ministry officials. I would want to thank the PS and the Assistant Commissioner for that excellent presentation. Now I take the pleasure to read the way forward for the remaining manifesto period and beyond. In order to contribute effectively to a national development, the sector has identified within its policy goals key areas of focus as follows. 1, Sustainable Energy Development Program. Focus will be to develop power generation, transmission, and distribution infrastructure to support value addition, promotion of renewable energy, and energy efficiency will also be prioritized. 2, Sustainable Development of Petroleum Resources Program. Emphasis will be on outputs that facilitate attainment of first oil production with focus on local content development. 3, Mineral Development Program. Complete the airborne geophysical surveys of the Karamoja region, accredit and operate a modern mineral laboratory, put in place mineral beneficiation centers in the country, and promote mineral value addition. Critical performance and synergies to accelerate the progress. 1, implementation of power sector reforms. The ministry has started implementing these reforms, including merger processes for the energy agencies in the ministry. 2, under facilitating the role of the state in development in driving development. The ministry, through Uganda Electricity Generation Company Limited, UEGCL, initiated the process of strengthening the electricity generation management by taking over the management of generation plants that were hitherto managed by the private sector. To date, 2 power plants of Nalubale and Kira power stations, as well as the thermal power plant, have been taken over by the national company, which is responsible for generation of electricity. Promotion of productive uses of electricity through creating linkages with the programs, institutions, private sector. Such linkages include, but not limited to, EMIOGA, parish development model, power training institutions, and also research in the energy sector involving, as I stated earlier on, universities who are going to use the laboratories which are existent in the various universities for research in the energy sector. This cuts across. We are not only just looking at establishing the best laboratory for minerals at the ministry, but we shall also be looking across where there are existing laboratories that we can use for analysis of minerals in the country. It is the most focus is going to be identifying centers of excellence where there are human resource and also facilities to support the development and use of the various resources that we have as a country. With this, I will wish to thank the organizers of this, and we would be available to answer any questions and give clarifications in the various areas where we might have not actually come across clearly. That's why we came with a strong team, a team of specialists, and I trust they will be able to answer all the questions that will arise here on. Thank you.
Very big applause to the 2 honorable ministers and their technical teams for the wonderful presentations. Allow me now, before I proceed, honorable ministers and your technical teams, to introduce to you my deputy director who is in the house, Mr. Fred Kamjira. I have members of the technical team, the other side, the senior economists, the principals, secretary, and the economists. Honorable ministers and technical teams, this activity we also partnered with the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, since it is responsible for government communication. And I believe there could be technical people from here with us whom we've been working with, so you could also stand up for recognition. I want to now open the session for Q&A. Usually we always give our observations from the manifesto and invite these people. And we will go through it very fast so that we give opportunity to the National Planning Authority, which is already here, to share with us where we stand on the midterm review. Let me start with the Minister of Finance, which presented first on the observations from the Manifesto unit. First of all, we want to thank you, Honorable Minister, for being very, very smart in the presentation by being able to align the achievements vis-a-vis the commitments, which I think the presentation was flowing very well. Actually, the two sectors, this was very, very well achieved. So we want to commend that. And that also makes it easy for us to be able to assess how far we are moving. We want to appreciate the fact that the ministry has been very, very prudent in the management and also ensuring macroeconomic stability of the country, like you rightly observed, keeping the inflation to single digit, managing the interest rates, and other aspects of the economy, as you read them out. However, there are these observations for concern as we engage different members of the citizenry. One, there is a concern on the issue of the debt to GDP ratio, which seems to be going beyond what would call the minimum. And I think the citizens need to be assured on how this needs to be managed. The other issue is the issue of I don't see your agency of revenue authority here, but the expansion of the tax base. Our GDP tax ratio has stagnated at 13%. We don't know what strategies will be done, and our target within the manifesto was to move this to some percentages higher. So we don't know the strategies that are being made in this direction. Our discussions and engagements with the local government leaders, they're also expressing some concerns of where money is swiped. And then they have challenges of revoting. The delays that are associated with where even revoting is successfully done sometimes leaves them with much more bigger problems to solve. And some even do not receive these monies again, and then which excavates the situation into a worse situation, especially where they have some contractual obligations to honor. So it is an issue. And associated with this is where money is released in the last quarter, flooded in the last quarter in big amounts, and then they are not able to absorb within the last quarters, and then money is swiped back. So I don't know, Honorable Minister, with your technical team, how you can guide the local governments on this. We also take note that there is an issue of staffing gaps within the local governments. Most of these service delivery commitments are implemented at local government level, and they have a challenge of capacity. And when we share with them, they say the wage. And we have had the Ministry of Local Government here. We have also had the Ministry of Public Service here, and all of them are saying the Ministry of Finance does not consider them when it comes to these issues. Maybe you need to assure them the reasons behind that. The other aspect was the issue of these YouGift projects, both in health and education, which are key in the manifesto deliverables, where a certain procurement system, called hybrid procurement system, has had contractual management challenges, because I think a contract is given many contracts than I think they can manage, and I'm told this was cleared at cabinet level. So this has also led to some of the challenges where money is swiped at the end of the financial year before it is utilized, and then it causes these revolting challenges. The cost of doing business, Honorable Minister, especially when it comes to the cost of credit in this country, it is also another concern. We are very mindful of the fact that the government has capitalized UDB and also has helped, supported some businesses by being joint venture businesses through UDC. But there is still a concern that the cost of credit is still high, and largely occasioned by the fact that sometimes the government borrows locally and then it suffocates the private sector. It suffocates, I think, the space where many of the Ugandans would be willing to borrow from. So maybe the country needs to be assured on that area on how these Ugandans can be helped. Then on the support that has been, especially this recovery fund, the SM COVID-19 recovery fund, and the other funds that you have committed for development purposes, there is still a huge bureaucracy in terms of access. And it seems like the local, even the SMEs do not access this money as easily as they wish. So these are the observations from the manifesto unit as far as the Ministry of Finance is concerned. Let me also run through the same for the Ministry of Energy so that now we can invite the questions at once. The unit wishes to commend the efforts that have been put in place in trying to meet the obligations that we pledged in this social contract, and this is a sector which is huge and also very, very critical, since it possesses what you would call the national wealth of the. However, you have raised some issues on how we are moving, but I think we need to do more. On the issue of the regulation of the artisanal mines, I think there is a policy is scattered here. Don't know whether there is even one in place. If it is there, maybe you need to assure the country on how this area of artisanal mines can be regulated, and especially when it also comes to the safety, because we are told some of them are using even crude methods, which could be injurious to their health. You have also touched on the issue of vandalism. We don't know what strategy you are putting in place to deal with this emerging threat. I think it is an area maybe which you need to share with the other agencies of government. This could be posing a national security, or it could be part of the national security issues, so that it doesn't turn out to be sabotage of sorts. And on yes, I think a lot of something studies have been done. However, there is concern that some of the prospective licenses are in hands of few people. I don't know how far true this is. That you can also show Ugandans that whoever is interested in prospecting, this is the procedure, and the licenses are very available. And then those who, how long do these licenses stay in people's hands? And if somebody has not shown any progress in this report, how do you regularly audit this? So that it also opens up. Then the local governments are also concerned on the royalty issues, the fees. I don't know whether this is now properly explained in the Minerals Act that was amended. Maybe they can be guided. Sometimes these issues come up because of lack of information. That could help them on knowing what to do and how they can go about it. I was very excited, and also the unit wishes to register its appreciation on how you have approached the national content issue. If this is well operationalized, I think the Ugandans can be proud to be part and parcel of the economic development. Otherwise, the whole fear has been that they don't want to spectate. They should participate. But as the way you explained it, and I think all Ugandans who are listening and watching this program should now have no more fears as far as the national content is concerned. Maybe if you fail on other procedure, but the opportunity is very there to serve and participate in our economy. The cost of electricity, Honorable Minister, and your technical team is still an issue. I know a lot of efforts have been made in this area, but I think Ugandans still feel the tariff is still high. And I think for a number of times I have listened to the President, this 5 cents, US 5 cents, you would want it to be cutting across all consumption levels, not only to these big consumers. Maybe for a start, that's the way to go. But I think the wish of the President is to see that the US 5 cents is standard across the consumption spectrum. With the restructuring of REA through the rationalization program of government, I think a lot of projects were stalled, and these Ugandans need to know how, probably now that there is this area has been managed and there is a direction, how do their hopes keep alive, especially in areas where the projects had started, where poles maybe were put, maybe lines were put, and there is no electricity simply because of these restructuring challenges that came through the way forward on this. Then we also see you talking about the initiatives on the framework and standard for electrical charging. I think this is the way to go, since we may be also fitting within the global culture of dealing with vehicles now which are electrically charged. We were here and we are glad and we're excited to listen to the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovations. And the observation is here whether you are working in close collaboration on this area in as far as this is concerned, so that we don't have a silo approach to this. STI is doing this, maybe you're also doing this, but if there is collaboration, I think that would be very good. I think Ugandans would also, we are happy to know that the refinery issue is probably taking off. If the FID is concluded as you had pledged here, we would maybe see more flows of foreign money into our economy, and that would support the existing growth levels to maybe the minister, when he's coming in another year, you'll be telling us another percentage as far as the economic growth is concerned. Those are the observations from the unit. And now allow me to invite the members of the media if they have any. And we will not take many questions because time is not on our side. So that we conclude this session and we can invite NPA. Francis, where are you starting from? Here. I think there's somebody here. From New Vision? Okay. Thank you. Honorable Ministers, maybe I also need to add this and say that as you respond, you are also at liberty to invite your technical teams and heads of agencies that are present to complement and supplement your responses. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Minister Martin Kitubi from the New Vision. My first question will go to the Minister of Finance. In your presentation, you hinted on you're giving us a status report on access to the COVID funds by enterprises, but also revealed that that money is still there. Could you kindly tell us why 3 years later or 2 years later, people are not still going for that money? Could it be the restrictions that are many and they can't access? Then also, you hinted on the fact that some money was withheld, which had been planned for the National Housing Corporation in this financial year, because one of the shareholders is absent. So what happens to the corporation if the shareholder stays away for a long period of time? Then the other thing is you hinted on the establishment on a farmers bank and also another national corporation cooperatives bank. Isn't that duplication? Yet we already have UDB, we have Microfinance Support Center. Why are we creating another institution with similar mandates? I'll take you to the last one on the RAPEX, that is the rationalization and merger of government institutions. As the Minister of Finance, we expect you by now, you should be preparing funds probably to pay off those are expected to be laid off in the merger. So kindly, as Minister of Finance, tell us how you've prepared for the next financial year related to rationalization.
Okay. You still have more?
Yeah, for energy, Minister of Energy.
Okay.
I'll bring the permanent secretary. You, on the petroleum subsector, there was a plan to have a local content fund whereby government will be making deductions of 1% to each contract. We've already awarded contracts. Other contracts are coming for ECOP, and we're missing out on this money. And is there a hope that this money will be accessible to Ugandans? Then two, on the establishment of the National Mining Company, we really want to understand when we intend to operationalize this company and what shares it will have, what stake it will have in the respective licenses. Then also merger. Some institutions under the Energy Ministry, the generation, distribution, and transmission are proposed for merger. How is the ministry planning to, one, manage the assets of these institutions? They have buildings, they have whatever. Then also the workers. Thank you.
Okay. Next here.
Thank you. My name is Diano Oloing Peters from UBC. Mine goes to the Honorable Minister of Finance on the aspect of the agri credit facility, which is given to the money which comes from the Bank of Uganda and also goes through to the commercial banks to try and help the SMEs. Some of the SMEs that we interact with end up not getting this money. And the reason they give is that the commercial banks which are supposed to give them this money or access this money actually give them at the interest of the commercial banks and not the 12% of the Bank of Uganda. So how is the government going to work on that issue? Because the money ends up not being accessed by the intended beneficiaries. Then finally, going to the mining sector, during the presentation, I just want to know if there are any plans by and hint on the issue or work on the issue of sand mining, because I'm aware that sand is now a mineral in the country. It is designated as a mineral in the country, but we have rampant encroachment on wetlands and other riverbanks. How is this being regulated? And then also, we are aware that government does not actually export unprocessed minerals. But when we go to areas like Busia, there is illegal gold mining, which is still ongoing. So how are you handling some of these issues? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Judge William Kataloba. I work with Namirembe FM. Honorable Minister Finance, we can see an allocation of 954.853 billion for the salary enhancement of scientists and more so healthy professionals. We can see medical officers on strike every time. They claim little pay and delayed payment. What do you have to say about this? Then, two, we can see 175.297 billion for the salary enhancement of senior UPDF senior officers. How about the police, and which plans do you have? Then three, we have not seen the number of beneficiaries for the PDM program, just as it has been highlighted on Emyoga. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think those are the last one there.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Kalema. I work with Watchdog. My question goes to Honorable Minister Amos. You said the economy grew from 3.5% to 4.6%. I just want us to understand, could you please break down for us? Because when you come and speak these figures, you leave the layman not understanding what's about, what grew, what did not, who benefited, who is lacking, what muscles were weak that are strong now. I just want us, could you please break down for us this? Because I understand, every time you come and say the economy is growing, this percentage and this percentage, but how is it reflected in the lives of Ugandans? How is it reflected in the business community? How is it reflected down to someone who is down there, a layman trying to find what it means to mean life? How is it? Because the news say the economy is growing, but nothing changes in the lives of Ugandans. What do you mean when you say this percentage and this percentage? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. So, please, hurry up.
Thank you so much. My name is Pedison Mumbere. I work with Smart24. My question is going to PS, Minister of Energy. She talked about the memorandum of understanding that the government of Uganda signed with the Republic of Tanzania to construct gas pipeline. I would request her to break this down. What was in that memorandum of understanding? And then you talked about the 500 billion cubic feet purely gas that was discovered in Uganda. That's where exactly? And yeah, that's it.
Okay, so you run the other side and we finish. You people, if you want to ask questions, be confident. Now, when we are closing and then you are, we need to manage time productively.
Thank you so much. My name is Charles Wachoda, Minister of ICT. With all the beautiful presentations made, I only want to know, in terms of percentages, how do you rate yourselves via the implementation of the 2021-2026 Manifesto? Can you tell us where do we belong as of now? Thank you.
Okay, the last one there.
Thank you very much. My name is Amawonga Kits from Inkimedia News Online. Well, mine, I'm still following up the issue of pension. The UPDF pension. I've been going to Mbuyao, we've been told that some files were moved to the Ministry of Finance for payment since January. So I think there should be an issue between Finance and Bank of Uganda. So I wanted to find out the status of some of those files that left Defense to Finance on its way to Bank of Uganda so that the beneficiaries can access their resources. Thank you very much.
Okay. You are the last one. This time I have to dictate.
Yeah, my name is Adrek Nyamugawa from MCF and online. My question is on the PDM. Now that you've dispersed the cash to PDM, to the SACCOs, I would like to know the measures you have put in place for recovering this revolving fund on one hand, and then on the other side, the next step for the SACCOs, especially when it comes to the accumulation of these monies locally and also the production, which is expected to go high because of the injection of these monies.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe Minister of Energy, you could also highlight the counter on this. In terms of generation, we seem to have moved on well, but when it comes to evacuating this power to the citizens, now, do we have targets in terms of accessibility, in terms of connectivity, so that we say, like, in these 5 years, we need to wire the whole country, or we need to wire the country by this kind of percentages, so that Ugandans can also be assured that within a given time frame, the whole country will be electrified. I thank you, and at the same time, I want to now invite you, honorable ministers, starting with the Honorable Minister of Finance, to make your responses, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the questions that you have raised. I get the impression that you have been very attentive during our presentations, so thank you so much. Now, I'll answer a few questions, and then I will ask John Mweroha to also respond to some or supplement to some of my responses. John Mweroha is seated at the extreme end of the table. He's a commissioner of budget policy in the Ministry of Finance. Now, the first observation which the Secretariat made was about the worsening state of the debt to GDP ratio. I think by implication is saying that we appear to be over-borrowing. But as you know, we raise money for financing the budget largely through our revenues, tax and non-tax revenues. However, the resources that we mobilize are far less than what is required to finance the entire budget, including financing our debt portfolios as they fall due. And that means that that difference between what we are able to raise in terms of revenue and the overall, the total budget, creates what we call the fiscal deficit. That deficit has been broadening depending on the demands. You recall that whereas we had a budget of 48 trillion this year, the same budget is increasing to over 52 trillion shillings, suggesting that the demands into the budget have gone higher than what we are able to handle. And we're only expecting to raise revenue of 29-something trillion shillings. So that gap we finance through borrowing. So what we need to do is to make sure that we curtail our appetite so that the budget does not increase astronomically, and we have tried to do that in order to reduce the fiscal deficit. But at the same time, we need to grow our GDP, because the ratio you are talking about is the debt to GDP ratio, and the sustainable level has to be maintained at 50%. We have not yet hit that ceiling in nominal terms. We are now hovering around 48%. But the point I'm making here is we have to keep it within those sustainable levels according to our Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. We have made that commitment that we shall maintain it below 50%. And how do we do that? By growing our GDP. Because the GDP is now the denominator. The more you grow your GDP, the more you reduce your debt burden. Because you're talking about debt to GDP ratio. And that's why since morning we have been talking about those measures that are intended to accelerate GDP growth. You must have seen, for example, from the energy sector, the intervention from the minerals and energy sector, the interventions are they undertaking to ensure that we have more capacity within the energy and mineral sector, mineral beneficiation. All these lead to the growth of GDP. And this morning, I was talking about a growth rate of about 12.7% in the previous, this month, in the industrial sector. This is what is giving us the GDP growth. I talked about the services sector giving us 9%. And overall, I talked about a growth of over 7.5%, between February and March. So this is what we have to make sure that we maintain in order to remain within the sustainable levels of debt. We can only create the wiggle room for borrowing by increasing our GDP. We cannot avoid borrowing, but we make sure that the GDP grows and we go for concessional borrowing that gives us friendly terms of repayment, periods, and interest. So our debt strategy focuses on those areas. Ensure that we go for concessional borrowing, but there are some inevitable circumstances where we have to borrow commercial, especially where we go largely for budget support. But we shall make sure that we live to the commitment of the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. And so far, we are doing quite well. Now, relating to the expansion of the tax base, I think you were complaining about the tax to GDP ratio that is not growing. Well, this is a moving target again. As we try to accelerate the GDP growth, the tax to GDP ratio almost remains static because we're trying to accelerate GDP growth. And we need to see the tax to GDP ratio go into levels like 20%, but we have been stagnating around 13%. Our tax Revenues have been growing, as you note. This year, if you're talking about 25 trillion shillings, next year we are moving to about 29 trillion shillings. But you realize that the tax to GDP ratio will almost remain the same because GDP is growing. The second thing is that the tax base, of course, depends on the capacity of the economy. We have to build the base, the foundation, the industrial sector, the agricultural sector, and remember that from the agricultural sector, we collect very little tax from that sector. It's a consumer of tax revenue, but little is collected from the agricultural sector. Why? Because there are numerous exemptions happening in that sector. And the efforts to collect money through taxes in that sector have not been very fruitful. The chemical, most of the inputs you use in agriculture are actually tax-free. But there's a movement to address the issue of tax exemptions in all the areas, including VAT, excise duty. In fact, in the recent presentations in Parliament, we have moved to remove some of these exemptions. And we shall continue to do so in income tax as well, numerous exemptions there. So as we widen the economy, broaden the economy, I believe that the tax to GDP ratio, and I mean reducing also the tax expenditure, tax exemptions, we should be able to raise our tax to GDP ratio. Someone raised, I think you also raised my question about the money that is swept at the end of the financial year and our failure and the releases that come late. I'll ask John, this falls directly in his docket. He will come and explain that one. You raised an issue about capacity at local government. I didn't quite clearly get in terms of wage provide consumption, the utilization.
They say proposals have been made, but funds have not been able to allow wage them. So the capacities are the capacities are weak.
Or the human capacities.
Human resource capacities.
Also, okay, we have not enhanced the wage bill relating to local governments. I think that's quite obvious that we have a budget now largely consumed by debt repayments plus the wage bill. We have to be very mindful of that. There are pressures relating to enhancing wages. There are also pressures for recruiting more personnel. And we have to make sure that these two are kept in check. And in doing so, some of these deserving institutions are not getting what is required. Because as we indicated at the beginning, we have to make sure that we maintain our debt to GDP portfolio within sustainable levels. So wages can only, or the wage bill provision can only be made commensurate with our debt and budget strategy. Now, gift projects in health and education, you raised concern about procurement and management challenges associated with procurement contracts. Some of these issues have been reviewed, and we have had a meeting with the donors and reviewed our strategy for UGIFT and the restoration of the resources that had not been consumed in the previous years, especially the years that were affected by COVID. So we have had a review of the UGIFT program, and I think it is now being brought back on course. But John will supplement that. Now, the cost of credit is quite high. In my presentation, I indicated that it's actually down. I indicated some figure that was above 20% and now reducing to about 18% commercial lending. This is a phenomena that has not been in Uganda alone, but it's a global phenomena that world over we have all been experiencing. Now, of course, the cost of credit is influenced by numerous factors. Recently, the global factors relating to inflation and the contractionary measures imposed by the central banks across the world have necessitated that they raise the CBR, the central bank rate. And when a central bank rate is raised from about 4% to 10%, it sends strong signals to raise interest rates. But it's all done in a bid to try and manage inflation, because we do inflation targeting, and we want to make sure that inflation is single digit. So in that effort, we experienced a spell of increases in the cost of credit. But slowly, as the CBR is reducing, the cost of borrowing is reducing in tandem. But we have supported this with different measures of providing resources. I mentioned the different programs that are now available. I mentioned the money available under UDB, money under the Microfinance Support Center. We have the SME Fund, the Agricultural Credit Facility. And as you know, these resources are available, but they are conditioned for accessing them. Some of these may not be so easy for ordinary borrowers to access these resources, because first we have to make sure that these funds actually perform. You know, we don't want the fund to fail. But we have had a number of credible borrowers in many areas. The Agricultural Credit Facility has been doing quite well, and we have provided additional resources to it. The SME, commonly called the COVID Fund, is not performing to its expectation. And I think the Bank of Uganda, which is coordinating the implementation or the utilization of this fund, is the best position to give a good response about this. We are not quite clear why the private sector is not responding, and yet we try to provide what you may consider to be the most friendly terms for accessing this credit. Sometimes, you know, we deliver these products through the private sector, which may have its other overriding private interests. Because the institutions we are using also own some other funds that they are implementing, some of which are probably delivering delivering more profit to them than the fund that we are providing. So maybe, I'm just assuming, but there are some underlying factors which our researchers need to interrogate to establish why, given the concessional terms associated with these loans or with these funds, why they are not performing to their expectation. So that answers, I think, the question relating to SME Recovery Fund. I don't know whether you will have Bank of Uganda here, but because they are managing most of these funds, they are best positioned to answer why they are not performing well. But we have done our part to make sure that the funds are available. We have enhanced the capitalization of UDB for the private sector to access more resources. I talked about a capitalization of 1.1 trillion from, I think, as low as 400 billion, and we are continuing to provide more capital to UDB, not to mention other lines of credit that they are getting through other forms of resources. Now, I think this was New Vision. Yeah, you talked about the access to the SME fund, and I think I've just explained. You also raised a question about the National Housing Construction Corporation, that absentee shareholder. Because we are two shareholders, the government of Uganda and the what is it called, the Libyan government, people's, just forgive me, but whatever the correct name is, but the Libyan government, let me call it so, we have challenges of establishing the rights, representative to represent the government of Libya into the operations of this company. And since we are taking decisions, shareholder decisions of investment and so on, has become almost impossible. And we are waiting on to see if we shall establish the rightful person representing the government of Libya. So far, we have failed. And that has complicated issues of running this corporation. We have continued to deal with some of the issues, making sure that the existing investments continue to operate, addressing issues of liabilities. We have done all that. But now to go further and invest, you need to have a shareholder decision. Who takes what liability, who contributes what to the investment. That's why, but our intent was to make sure that we capitalize it as required in the manifesto to deliver more housing in this country. Fortunately, the private sector has done a good job in this area. Now you are questioning why create another bank? Well, this has largely come from the private sector demanding that we should restore the cooperative bank, and we should also establish the agricultural bank. And they have very good arguments. For example, in agriculture, they say that financing agriculture has a lot of risks. Our agriculture here is rain-fed. You need a long gestation period. Sometimes the volatility in the markets. So many risks, associated with agriculture. And the argument is being made that lending for industrial establishments is not the same as lending for agriculture because of the risks associated with agriculture. So they say that must be a separate set of financing regime. And based on those recommendations, that's why we are now doing a study to establish the justification of establishing such a bank vis-a-vis the existence of the UDB and other funding institutions. I think the study will inform the need for establishing that bank and what is required. How we are preparing for the merger, the rationalization of government departments. The rationalization, we are on course, but the Ministry of Public Service, I'm sure, should have reported here. They still have a detailed paper to make to Cabinet on how this is going to be finalized and come out clearly on the financial implications for the merger. We are trying to make sure that the financial implications are not so big, to ensure that we absorb the existing establishment to the extent possible during the merger. We are working together, not in position to disclose much at this stage until Cabinet has pronounced itself. But we are on course, and we are working together with the Ministry of Public Service on this matter. We are monitoring the numbers as we move on. And I'm sure by the time Cabinet makes a decision on the matter, we shall be in a position to deal with any consequences. From the UBC journalist, again, raised the issue of the SME Recovery Fund. I think he was complaining about the interest rates imposed. I don't know. Because in this fund, you cannot go beyond the agreed interest rate. I think it is 12%. You cannot go beyond. No commercial bank is allowed to do that. That would amount to breach of contract. Yeah, there was a question relating to the 954 billion for salary enhancement of medical, and he's asking why medical officers are on strike, given that enhancement. I think it's not the medical officers, but I think we have been talking about the interns. And the cabinet has since taken a decision on how to address that problem, to address it positively, and I'm sure we are on the way to make sure that it is fully resolved. The whole issue is now availing the necessary resources. On EPDF officers, he was asking about what about other cadres? Why are you not providing for them? Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, we cannot do everything at a go. We have to move slowly, sequencing these interventions based on the capacity to pay. So everything is being closely monitored, including the wages of the rest of the civil servants. But we have to remain within our limits. We cannot go beyond the acceptable debt to GDP ratio. Now, on the number of beneficiaries for PDM, I think what we spoke about earlier is the amount of money that has gone to circles. We're expecting slightly over a trillion shillings at the end of the financial year, and we are still living up to that commitment. We have so far sent 522 billion to the qualifying circles. Now, we are intending to send more. And this money is in the form of a grant. So we don't expect that that money will be sent back to the center. The only challenge now is between on-lending that money from the circle to the ultimate beneficiaries, the enterprise groups, or the beneficiaries within the enterprise groups at the village levels. That's where there are still challenges, because we need to ensure that proper training is provided, necessary capacity is provided at the circle to choose who to lend the money and how to follow up the money. There are mechanisms that we have to put in place and that are appearing in the forthcoming budget. But for as long as the money is residing with them, I'm sure they should be able to use that money as and when the capacity for utilizing the money has been generated. So, on the part of government, the money is with the circles, capacity is being built by various stakeholders through mindset change and capacity building programs to make sure that they appropriately utilize this money. So we should not be worried. Well, there's a complicated question here that we are talking about growth in GDP from 3.5 to 4.6%. Break this down for us. What does this mean to the ordinary person? So I think sometimes this is not clear understood. I entirely agree, because we are giving an aggregate. We are looking at the gross domestic product, the value of goods and services that are produced in the country, and how that is growing year in, year out, and you can also measure that on a monthly basis if you like. But what is contained in that growth is the value of goods and services produced in the country. So when we say that it has increased by 3.5% or by 4.6%, we are talking about the growth from the previous GDP quantum of the value of goods to the current year. That's what we are comparing. And it's an aggregate number, statistic, but when you break it down, you find that some people are generating more goods and services, and others are generating nothing. And if you are generating nothing, certainly you are not earning income. So it raises issues of equity or inequality in the distribution of income. We might be talking about a huge GDP level, but with a lot of inequalities. And that is why there are indicators to measure inequality, the Gini coefficient, has to be closely monitored. So it's not enough to say that GDP is growing without looking at the Gini coefficient to see how it is performing in terms of equity, the distribution of income. And that's why we have adopted a policy within the UN, actually, of leaving nobody behind. And that is why we now have the PDM to make sure that the 39% of the population is not left behind as we talk about this broader indicator, the GDP growth. And as we grow, the structure of the economy keeps changing. Now we witness a lot of growth in the real economy, in agriculture, in industry, in services. And you might witness that certain sectors are now suffering, say, in the housing industry, there could be challenges. You know, as you grow, certain sectors tend to lag behind, others grow, but ultimately, the important thing to monitor is your GDP really growing. So I'm sure there are people that are still left behind, but there are measures intended to deal with them. Now, how do we rate ourselves? I think there was a question there. It's dangerous to rate ourselves. If I was to do so, I would say I think we are performing at 80%. And I believe you all agree, isn't it? There's no objection. So it is you now to be rating us from what we have said. Are we doing fairly well? Because, you know, we are recovering from COVID these last 2 years. And it's a fact that the economy was under complete lockdown for nearly 2 years. And that is the period now we are reporting on. But we managed to do something during that difficult period. And as the Minister of Finance, our main responsibility is to make sure that these government programs are adequately financed. Whatever she was talking about was referring to finance. So we make sure that that money is available, but also ensure that we maintain the macroeconomic stability to avoid inflation. John, I don't know if you have anything to add?
Through my minister, let me respond to 2 or 3 issues that remained, but he has responded to most of all the issues that have been raised. One of the issues that I need to respond to is to do with sweeping back the money at the end of the financial year, where local government's money was swept back and revoting delayed. As you are all aware, the law requires that at the end of every financial year, the appropriation made by Parliament must expire. The appropriation expires at the end of the financial year. And once it expires, the funds related to that financial year must be returned to the consolidated fund. Whether it is a local government vote, a central government vote, the funds must come back to the consolidated fund in line with the law. Now the issue is, you mentioned that for local governments, money is released late, and that is the main reason why it comes back, which is not true. Because as finance, we are committed to making sure that we release money in the by the 10th date of the first month in a given quarter. And we are committed to this. And especially for local governments, the third quarter, we release all the remaining development budget balances. That is in January. All that balance on the development budget is released. However, not all votes finalize the release process at the same time. There are those who take long, who have communicated the expenditure limits, but some of them delay to warrant the funds. They take long to warrant, and then you find that there is a delay. They cannot absorb the money by the end of the financial year. Other than the transfer that go through other MDAs, we call that OGTs or other government transfers. The rest of the funds that go direct to local governments, we release that money in time. For other government transfers, there is a bit of delay, where Manifesto, Minister of Finance communicates the release. Let's say, for example, when you talk of money like road maintenance, this money first is released to Uganda Road Fund. Then Uganda Road Fund will also have to release it, to communicate to local governments how much has been released. So at times, there is that delay. There is that delay, but other than that, money is released directly, and in any case, if it is development by the third quarter, all this money is released. This is also related to the hybrid approach, where we said also, for UGIFT funds specifically, most of these local governments, they attribute the delay in absorbing funds to the hybrid approach, the hybrid process in terms of procurement. Initially, at the start of this program, yes, there was a challenge. Hybrid means that local governments and the implementing MDA come together to identify or to determine, to evaluate the best bidders. They work together. But during the first years, you'd find that the contractor is awarded more than 10, 5, 6 contracts, irrespective of the capacity of the contractor. This affected the implementation and absorption of funds. Most of the contractors did not have capacity. He would embark on a project, let's say in Mbarara, then moves to Shenye, abandons that one, goes to Kabari. So at the end of it all, you find many projects are incomplete. So as the minister indicated, this was reviewed. The process was reviewed, and it was decided that no contractor should be awarded more than a maximum of 2 contracts. So hopefully now, the funds will be absorbed and projects will be implemented in time. The other pending question was about wages, that the wage, most MDAs and local governments are complaining about the wage being inadequate, not being sufficient. Yes, we know that we're experiencing the budget, we have a problem, a challenge of the budget constraint. However, when it comes to wage, we all know that wage takes the first call on the discretionary resources, on the money available. Wage takes the first call. But the challenge we have is coming up with, rather understanding exactly the actual wage requirement. The figure keeps varying. When you get information from the MDAs and local governments, it is on the higher side. When you compare with the numbers submitted by by Minister of Public Service that is responsible for government to employees, they give you a different wage requirement. So as finance, we fail to understand how much money is required. What is the total wage obligation? So that's why we decided to undertake a joint exercise together with Minister of Public Service end of last year, interacting with every MDA, every vote, local government, central government, to understand, to harmonize these figures and come up with exact wage requirement. When that exercise was undertaken, we came up with like about 1.7 trillion as the shortfall in the wage bill. But still, Public Service made it clear that most of the so-claimed employees causing this shortfall are not in the structure. Many votes recruit, especially local governments, outside the structure, hence causing a wage shortfall. So we said, now, if this is the case, let us provide a bit of funds to sort out partially this problem, to sort it out partially as we undertake a forensic audit. So government, Minister of Finance, requested an Auditor General to undertake a forensic audit, a special audit to ensure that we come up with the actual wage requirement so that as a ministry we know how much money we need to cater for wage or the workers of government. So the issue is understanding the wage requirement. Otherwise, we give wage or remunerations to workers first priority. I thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. The issues you raised in the energy and mineral sector are actually commonly asked issues. It's more about information. And to give the answer to this, I'll structure myself. I'll talk at the policy level. The PS will talk on the strategic level. And the various sector heads, sub-sector heads, directors, will talk on the implementation level. So this is more about information. The time that we would require to give this information, we shall summarize it, but Director, you may have to invite us to talk a whole day on this, or you organize us to go to the media to talk about this. The issues which you raised, you're actually right to say you need actually more. You want to hear more about the sector. You are correct and you are spot on. So I'll actually talk now. The three sectors are all covered in the issues which are raised here. There is energy, there is minerals, and there is petroleum. When we came to the sector, at the onset of implementation of the manifesto, we actually identified an entry point. The entry point was, how do we make this happen? How do we drive the sector? We actually focused on developing and amending the various laws. In the first session of Parliament, we actually reviewed and amended 3 acts. Each of these sectors, the starting point was amendment of the law. For the energy, we amended the Electricity Act, which actually defined what we wanted done. The issues which are raised here are actually provided for in the law, Amended Act of Electricity 2022, and we are now developing regulations and implementation strategies. The regulations are actually being delivered, and the strategies are actually being reviewed to implement the various issues that have been raised here. For example, vandalism is provided for in the law, and it was a protracted debate between the ministry and cabinet, and was assented to by His Excellency the President. Vandalism in the law is provided, and if you are found vandalizing electricity assets, electricity infrastructure, the law provides that you actually commit a crime, and that crime is punishable. And this one, in summary, somebody found vandalizing electricity assets is liable to paying a fine of 1 billion shillings or imprisonment for 15 years. The details can be given. Now the strategy is being done. What I also need to point out here, the director asked, how is the ministry managing? How can we get the other sectors to play? We have actually established intersectoral committee that sits to define strategies for controlling vandalism. We have in that committee the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Water, Ministry of Works, and the others. The PS will dwell more on that, and they are doing an excellent job. But the most important thing is cascading the management of the electricity infrastructure to community level. So all of us here have a role to play to control vandalism. We have put a structure what to do on it. On electricity, we also talked about the tariffs. The tariffs is also provided for in the law. The details are actually being developed through the various strategies. And this one will also be given a detail later. As I say, this is more about information. Restructuring of REA affecting the project implementation. These two are not related. We take them separately. The restructuring of REA is actually provided for in the Act, and taking the funding from a separate fund, and we have provided that that fund actually is transferred into infrastructure fund, and we are working out modalities to get this one done. But taking REA, once the fund is not provided for, it is also provided that it becomes a department. It is now a program in the ministry. Now, the implementation of the projects are actually going on, except it is not under an agency. It is now under a program of the ministry. So these are two different things, and the funds are still being, that department is being funded. The projects are being formulated. The PS will provide details on that. Collaboration with the Ministry of Science and Innovations on e-mobility is actually provided for. We have interministerial committee which works on e-mobility. And the Ministry of Energy is a key player in that endeavor. We are working very closely with the Ministry of Science and Technology to make sure that e-mobility for this country is well structured, and it is actually integrated in our strategy. When we talk of taking electricity to the end user, what we are also thinking, who else is going to use this electricity? We are looking at transport as being a key user of electricity. If you take the number of vehicles here, if all of them used electricity, it would be more than a large industry. So we're thinking about it as a sector in close collaboration with the Ministry of ICT. I'm taking it at a policy level. The target for evacuation of electricity is our very urgent activity that we need done. In my presentation, I talked about where we are in generation. But when you look down on utilization, we are targeting to be at 2,000 megawatts by the end of this year. But the utilization at peak is hardly 900 megawatts. So it means we need to focus more on transmission and distribution. All our efforts for now is actually focused to make sure that electricity reaches to the end user. And this also talks to the interventions which I talked about. One, providing we have a policy for free connections of electricity. And this is an area which you rightly say the population says electricity is expensive. Connections, before we come down to the tariffs. And we have provided 2 measures to ease the connection of electricity. We have the subsidy program, which I actually talked about, but in passing. And that's why I was saying we need actually, we come and talk over these things one by one, because this is the heart and this is what the population wants to hear. We need to come and talk about it and also take the questions from the population. Our target for electricity coverage in this country is defined through our strategy. Our dream is by 2030 we should have universal coverage of electricity. Everybody in the country should be using electricity. That's an ambitious program. Director, it costs money. To make that happen, we shall require colossal amounts of money. We may need $5 billion to deliver this. And this one will intimidate my colleague who was talking here before. Where does he get the money? My responsibility is to define strategies. But I'm always mindful when I'm defining those ambitious strategies, looking at the envelope. But since my sector is also a big money earner, we may have to discuss around that. How can we plow some money to deliver the ambitions of the country in the sector? To get the money, we have got to invest into it. Because, for example, electricity is a driver of development. In a country that uses huge amounts of electricity is also developed and would wish to be there. We are still very low consumers of energy. Our per capita consumption of energy is even below the African level. And then when you talk of developed countries, we are still very, very low in it. So here we need to discuss how we can develop and transform the economy of Uganda through investing in the sector. So our target is by 2030, everybody should be using and connected to electricity. And here, don't mistake it. When we talk of electricity, at times everybody thinks about getting connected to a grid. But that's not it. When I talked of us being at 57%, the grid connection is only 19%. 37 or 38% is actually still on either standalone rooftops, mini grids, because those, when you are using a solar system, that's also a form of, it's electrons moving. It is only using a different approach. So when I say 2030, everybody should be connected, it should be either you are on the solar systems or you are on the grid. So that's our target. So the question which was asked, how do we assess ourselves as energy? My colleague tried to answer it, but I will be a little bit moderate. We are in the second, this midterm review of the Manifesto delivery. Why should I expect to be at 80? What will I do the remaining time? What I will tell you here, as I said in my way forward, for every manifesto pillar and the promise that we made, we're actually making progress. And if you note the way I was presenting, we have done the baseline. And we are now at implementation level. The laws that we put in place, the plans, the strategies, are actually in place now. So that was the most difficult part of it. It takes brain to get these strategies. Implementation, when you have it properly defined, becomes simpler. So I'll say we are between 50 and 60 because the hardest part has been done. Give us time and the resources, I'm very sure we shall deliver. And this is a commitment by my ministry. We are committed to deliver the manifesto. Whatever was promised, we shall be able to do it, resources being available. That's a limiting factor. Otherwise, I have trust of my technical people. I have the demand to deliver. Electricity, the demand is high. Minerals, the demand is high. Then on minerals is also the same. We have actually done the laws, we have done the strategies, we have done the thinking in all aspects. But I wish to point out, when we're reviewing the mineral law, we actually thought we would combine building materials and the minerals. In the course of the discussions, we actually realized that this need to be separated. So the law that we have, which we amended, is for minerals and mining. And we were directed that we need to come up with a new law for building materials. And this is sand, marram, aggregates. Those things are going to be addressed on the new law. And we have developed the principles for that law. We don't need to go back to developing them, even clearance from cabinet, because the principles were integrated into the mining and the mineral law. So we are now actually drafting the law. We are going straight to drafting the law on building materials. On mines, for now, the regulation is, you talked about going to the wetlands and so on, and mining and coordinated and regulated mining. We shall work with the NEMA to actually see what can be done before we come specifically with a new law on the sand. But illegal miners is provided for in the new law. There is we are working on the regulations, and the details will be given on that one. On petroleum and the gas and what was signed with the People's Republic of Tanzania, United People's Republic of Tanzania, it may not be very easy for us to give you, but the PS will give you a summary of it. Here we need a longer conversation and what we expect to achieve on that MOU, and on the local content. We also have it in the law. And what we presented here is actually a strategy and a summary of the strategy on what we intend to do. Director, I appreciate your appreciation of what we are doing in the local content in the petroleum industry, and even the royalties for minerals. We are doing quite a lot, as we provided in the synopsis that we gave you here. I'll ask the PS to come here to now talk about the strategies and then the implementation. I'll ask the PS to cascade it. That's why I came with a big team. I trust them, they will give the information. And those are the people we should target to take to radios, because it's more on implementation. So thank you very much.
Okay, the Honorable Minister has largely covered most of the areas. CEO ERA will be given an opportunity to come in on the tariffs. Director Petroleum will speak briefly on the local content fund and our strategy around it. And then Mr. Bahati, you will come in to clarify on the prospective licenses and the mechanisms we've put in place in the law to ensure we are managing non-performing licenses. So on the energy side, the Minister has largely addressed all the aspects. I'll just come in briefly on the mergers. There was a question specifically on how we intend to address issues of assets and workers. And just to tie in with the honorable ministers, including the one of Minister of Finance, this we are doing together with the Minister of Public Service, and we are looking at the entire spectrum, not just the workers, but also how we harmonize and consolidate the assets of the different companies. There is a strategy for that and for the workers. But the key point here for the three companies in the sector, we are maintaining distinct business operations, and they will still require people, workers, meaning a big portion of the existing personnel in these entities will still be absorbed into the new company. So there shouldn't be any worries in that regard. And we've already demonstrated it even for the concessions that have just ended, for the ESCOM one, but also Namamve. We largely took on over 90% of the workers because the assets remain and the workers are still required. All we are doing is streamline and harmonize the operations of this company by merging it or merging them into one limited liability company with one board and then a singular management. But the work down remains. And then, of course, we have cross-cutting functions of procurement, human resource, where we then rationalize. So there shouldn't be any worry or any worries concerning that and how we will treat the employees. And we have a change management strategy that Minister of Public Service communicated that we shall apply as we go through this process with the Ministry of Public Service. Now, on the issues of petroleum, specifically the MOU with Tanzania, yes,